I never thought I'd be the kind of person to cut my own sister out of a trip, but here we are. My name is Julian, and I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. My younger sister, Lila, is 2 years behind me, and our youngest brother, Matt, is still in college. Lila and I used to be close when we were kids, but something changed once we hit our teenage years. She was always more demanding, more entitled, and more likely to spin a situation in her favor. When I started working full-time and began saving money, I didn't think she would see that as an invitation to mooch off me. Yet, over the years, she has somehow come to believe that my finances are meant to be shared at her whim. Despite many attempts to set boundaries, I always had a soft spot for her. Sometimes I'd pay for her groceries if she was struggling. Other times, I'd cover a small utility bill she claimed she couldn't handle. I'd excuse it, reminding myself she was family. But everything changed when I decided to surprise everyone with an all-inclusive getaway that I'd carefully planned for months. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Initially, I intended it to be a week-long vacation for me, my parents, Lila, and Matt. Our father has always worked 2 jobs, and our mother spent years juggling family obligations and a part-time gig to keep everything afloat. They deserved a break, and I had the money saved up to make it happen. I was excited to treat everyone to an exotic resort with great food, local culture, and plenty of activities. It wasn't cheap, but I calculated that I could swing it if I tightened my own budget for a few months. When I told my parents and Matt about the surprise, they were ecstatic. They thanked me a dozen times over and promised they wouldn't let me down. Lila, on the other hand, just assumed it was a given that she'd get to come along without contributing. I didn't push her on it because my intention was always to pay for the entire family. That was my gift, after all. At first, everything seemed normal enough. We talked about what we wanted to do once we got there, places we might visit, and souvenirs we might bring home. But beneath the surface, Lila was scheming in ways I couldn't have imagined. The first red flag appeared when Lila started asking if her friend Zoe could tag along. I'd met Zoe once at a birthday dinner, and she seemed nice enough, but I had carefully picked a package deal that matched my budget. Every extra person meant added costs for flights, hotel rooms, and meal plans. I explained as kindly as I could that I was already footing the bill for 4 people and that I didn't have funds to include anyone else. Lila shrugged and said it wasn't a big deal. Zoe would pay for herself, no problem. Yet she kept pressing, trying to convince me that a bigger group would be more fun. She tried painting a rosy picture of how Zoe would chip in and keep the party going. I didn't want to be the villain, so I told her I'd think about it. Behind the scenes, though, I called the resort. They said it would cost quite a bit more for an additional guest, and since I was the primary on the booking, I'd be the one financially responsible if Zoe flaked. That was enough to make me say no. Lila pretended to accept that decision, but I knew she was mad. The real trouble started a few weeks before we were supposed to leave. I was finalizing the itinerary, booking some excursions, and double-checking everyone's passport situation. That's when I found out Lila had been calling the resort on her own. She had claimed that she was the primary guest and attempted to modify the reservation. According to the agent I spoke with, Lila asked them to switch me to a smaller room and reassign the larger suite to her and Zoe. She also tried to remove my name from certain excursion reservations. In short, she was attempting to hijack the entire vacation that I was paying for. When I confronted her, she played dumb at first. Then she started whining that she deserved the bigger room because she was going to bring a friend, which of course, I had already vetoed. She even had the audacity to say that I could just crash on a pull-out couch if I couldn't afford a bigger room for myself. My patience was wearing thin, but I tried to stay civil. I reminded her that this was meant to be a family trip, not a girls' getaway for her and Zoe. She still wouldn't budge. I decided to involve our parents. And they were furious when they found out what she had tried to do. Dad confronted Lila, telling her to cut the nonsense or risk being left behind. She rolled her eyes and said she was joking, though nobody believed that. Mom tried to reason with her, explaining that this trip was a gift and that her antics were disrespectful to me. Lila wouldn't apologize. She just stood there, arms folded, complaining that I never understood her need to have fun. She insisted that traveling with just family was boring and that she and Zoe would liven things up. The tension in the house rose to a boiling point. Matt tried to stay neutral, but even he told her it was weird to try to take over a trip she wasn't paying for. I thought that confrontation would end it, but I was wrong. Lila doubled down, quietly stirring up trouble behind my back. First, she told Zoe to buy a plane ticket independently. Then, she tried to get my parents on board with letting Zoe share their room so it wouldn't cost me anything. Of course, that was a lie. Additional resort fees would still apply. As the departure date drew closer, I decided I'd had enough. I called the airline and the resort, verifying our reservations. Then I took steps to protect myself. I password protected the booking with a code only I knew. I told the resort that under no circumstances should they allow changes unless I personally authorized them. I also paid off the balance in full to prevent any last-minute adjustments. Around that time, Lila started bragging on social media about the awesome girls' vacation she was about to have. She posted pictures of Zoe and herself shopping for new outfits, talking about all the clubs they planned to hit. It was infuriating, but I kept my cool. The final straw came when Lila cornered me in the kitchen one night and declared that I should just be an adult and hand over my reservation details so she could finalize plans for her and Zoe. She spoke to me like I was a guest on my own vacation. Something inside me snapped. I realized there was no salvaging this. If I let Lila get on that plane, I'd be setting myself up for endless drama overseas. It was time for a drastic move. I logged into the airline's website and canceled Lila's ticket. I also called the airline to ensure the cancellation was final and irreversible. My parents and Matt still had their seats and everything else remained intact. Then I contacted the resort and told them to remove Lila's name from the hotel reservation. It took a bit of explaining, but once I proved I was the sole payer, they complied. I made sure only I could check in. After that, I pulled Mom and Dad aside and laid it all out. I explained that I was done with Lila's entitlement and manipulation, and that I didn't trust her to behave if she came along. Dad was upset but understood, while Mom tried to protest. However, I reminded them that it was my money on the line, and Lila had not only tried to sabotage me, but also tried to seize the entire trip for her own. In the end, they realized I was serious. Matt, surprisingly, said he was relieved. He admitted that he didn't want to watch us fight overseas, and he worried Lila would ruin the mood for everyone. We agreed to leave her behind and hope she learned a lesson. When Lila found out, she exploded. She called me every name in the book, accusing me of destroying her life. She claimed she had already invested in clothes, swimsuits, and travel accessories. She threatened to sue me, which was laughable. Then she tried to guilt-trip our parents, saying I was being vindictive for no reason. Dad told her to calm down, reminding her that this was entirely her fault. Mom tried to persuade me to reinstate Lila's ticket, but I'd already lost the money on the cancellation fees, and I wasn't going to let her hijack my vacation. It was non-refundable, which meant I was out several $100s, but it felt worth it. I blocked Lila on social media and told her if she showed up at the airport, I'd have security involved. She tried crying to Matt, but he wasn't interested in mediating anymore. He told me she'd tried to spin a story about how I was selfish and controlling, but he'd reminded her that I was the one covering the cost. For the first time in forever, my family was standing with me against her. She wasn't used to that, and it only made her angrier. The day of our flight, Lila didn't show up, which was good. My parents, Matt, and I boarded without incident. The trip itself was fantastic. We relaxed on the beach, tried new foods, and even took a day trip to a nearby attraction. For the first time in years, I felt at peace around my family. Mom eventually eased up and seemed to enjoy herself once she realized Lila wasn't going to burst in with drama. Dad and Matt were thrilled to be away from work and school. I even splurged on a spa day for Mom because she deserved some pampering. I won't say I didn't think about Lila, but every time I started to feel guilty, I remembered how she tried to steal the entire trip. That guilt vanished quickly. After all, this was supposed to be my gift to our parents and Matt, not a fiasco dominated by Lila's tantrums. We returned home feeling closer as a family. Even Dad, who had initially felt a bit uneasy about me cutting Lila out, said that we had the best time because we didn't have to deal with her nonsense. Matt joked that we should do it again next year. We expected Lila to be stewing in anger, but we didn't anticipate how quickly her situation would deteriorate. While we were gone, Lila got into a screaming match with her landlord. She had apparently fallen behind on rent and was demanding an extension, claiming she had paid for a vacation and didn't have enough money to cover everything. According to my dad's colleague, who happened to live in the same complex, Lila made a scene in the lobby, yelling about how it was all my fault. The landlord wasn't sympathetic, and a week after we got back, Lila was served an eviction notice. She tried to move in with our parents, but they have a small place, barely enough room for themselves. Matt lives in a dorm, so he was out of the question. She had nowhere to go. Suddenly, the sister who had tried to hijack my vacation was homeless, couch surfing with random friends until they got sick of her. She started calling me incessantly, leaving voicemails about how she was sorry and how she needed a place to stay for just a few weeks. At first, I considered it, but then I remembered how she had threatened me. She'd tried to make me the villain for protecting my own trip. She had shown no remorse when she was plotting to kick me out of the suite I'd paid for. She lied to our parents, to the resort, and to me. And when things didn't go her way, she hurled insults, threatened lawsuits, and boasted about how she'd be living it up with Zoe. Well, Zoe was nowhere to be found now, and Lila was the one with no place to call home. I told her I wasn't interested in helping someone who treated me like trash. I reminded her that she had burned every bridge, and I had no intention of letting her use me for stability while she figured out her next scam. She tried tears, she tried screaming, she tried manipulative lines about how family should help each other. I told her family also shouldn't steal from or betray one another. She had crossed every line. My parents pleaded with me, saying I should at least help her get back on her feet. I said I'd help pay for an extended stay motel if they wanted to chip in, but she wasn't living under my roof. As expected, Lila refused the motel idea. She thought she could waltz back into my life and sleep in my guest room, ignoring all the damage she'd done. I wasn't having it. After weeks of bouncing between friends, she ended up sleeping in her car. Our mother was frantic, begging me to reconsider. I told her that if Lila apologized and showed genuine remorse, maybe we could discuss partial support. But that never happened. Lila believed she was the victim, and she wouldn't own up to what she had done. Meanwhile, Zoe had apparently ghosted her, which came as no surprise to anyone except Lila. She occasionally posted dramatic updates on social media about how heartless her family was. She played up the sympathy card, hoping someone would offer her a spare couch. But word had gotten around about how she'd treated me, and apparently not many people wanted to take that risk. She tried calling Matt again, but he was in the middle of finals and refused to get dragged into her mess. Eventually, she tried to barge into my place when I wasn't home. She pounded on the door until one of my neighbors threatened to call the police. That was the last straw. I made sure my locks were updated and installed a camera by the front door. I warned my parents that if Lila showed up again, I'd have her trespassed. They pleaded with me to find some middle ground, but I refused. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Over the next few weeks, she continued to spiral. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she lost her part-time job because she was always late or not showing up at all. She blamed me for that too. She kept telling people she was supposed to be on a vacation that I'd snatched away from her. The irony was incredible. She never mentioned the fact that it was my money in the first place. Eventually, she called me one last time, sobbing, saying she was done playing games and just needed help. I asked if she was ready to own up to her actions. She hung up on me. That told me all I needed to know. She wasn't actually sorry. She just wanted to manipulate me into helping her again. I decided I was done for good. No more second chances. My parents still worry about her, but they've come to accept that she's toxic. They offered to let her crash on their couch, but she wants her own bedroom, privacy, and all the amenities she had before. That's not possible. Dad told her she could stay if she agreed to follow their house rules, but apparently that was too much for her. She disappeared for a while, only sending sporadic texts to Mom about how unfairly she's been treated. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty, but then I recall the way she conspired to throw me off my own trip. She had the nerve to demand the suite while relegating me to a smaller room. She tried to bring a friend without my permission. She tried to remove my name from my own bookings. If that's how she treats family, I don't owe her anything. Nobody does. Right now, she's crashing with an acquaintance outside the city. She occasionally tries to stir up drama online, but I've blocked her on every platform. I moved on with my life, and so has Matt. Even my parents have started planning small trips of their own, deciding they don't need Lila's negativity. I'm sharing this now because people keep asking if we'll reconcile. The truth is, I don't see how. Lila never admitted wrongdoing. Even after losing her home and job, she insists she's my victim. I won't lie. A part of me feels grim satisfaction that her manipulations blew up in her face. Maybe that's petty, but I've made peace with it. She crossed a line, and there's no going back. Forgiveness might be on the table for some families, but I'm not opening my door to someone who tried to boot me off my own vacation. If that means I'm heartless, so be it. At least I know I'm done being her doormat. I hope she realizes what she's done and makes real amends someday. Until then, she's not welcome in my home or my life. I have absolutely no regrets and refuse to give her another chance. I took my revenge by denying her the luxury she thought she could steal, and I feel zero shame. She wanted control, she wound up with nothing, and that's exactly what she deserves.